lesson had to do with results, right? I mean, whatever it takes. In Navy, there used to be a phrase that was used in a very positive connotation: beg, borrow, or steal. You got to get the work done. There are no excuses. I mean, how can you give an excuse when you're in a frontline force like the Navy? So, driving results is something that has been a guiding mantra for me. Obviously, people, who you are and what you can be is all dependent upon, your team. You're as good as your team. I think everybody is very humbled by this whole experience of Great Resignation. I guess the biggest lesson for the leaders, for CEOs and HR is to prepare themselves for messaging a holistic proposition to the employees, right?
Hey listeners, welcome back. Your favorite channel to amplify inspiration. This is Inspire Someone Today. Joining me today is a guest who needs no introduction. He's somebody who has sketched the echelons of Bank India Inc. Somebody who has to his credit setting up of 80 plus global capability centers across India and Poland. It's my pleasure to welcome Lalit Ahuja on Inspire Someone Today. Lalit, thanks for joining us today.
Shrikant, delighted to be here and thanks for having me.
Lalit, the caption that I had for you was from the high tides to the high rights. Starting your career with the Indian Navy, then moving on to India Inc., donning the role of CEO and now founder CEO of ANSR. It's been a fantastic journey from Indian Navy to where it is today. Walk us through your journey and some of the key lessons and reflection points in this journey, Lalit.
So it's been truly a fun ride and very intentional in some ways. As I keep telling everyone, 5 lives in one. Started my career, did 10 years in the Navy, had the opportunity to spend time at the academy, getting trained, training others, spent a lot of time on warships, saw hostilities, served in dockyards, had some diplomatic engagements. So a life full of diverse experiences. I guess if I have to put my naval experience in perspective, some of the best leadership lessons were learned in the Navy. And Navy sort of truly got me where I am today because it was all about driving results. Whatever it takes, you got to execute to perfection and to win. You got to have career agility. You got to move from one type of an opportunity to another kind of opportunity. And you're always learning while you're running, right? So, which is not too many career opportunities provide you with that leadership experience. From there, became the CEO of Datamatics, got an opportunity to pioneer the growth and evolution of the outsourcing industry in India. From there to starting LG Electronics in India. So the opportunity to truly bring in the consumer electronics revolution in the country, working with Rupert Murdoch and heading Star TV for a number of years before checking the I want to be an entrepreneur box. So, that's in some ways been a journey. And as I said, it's been a fun ride, living 5 very different lives in one life.
So very well put, 5 lives in one. Of the 5 lives that you have traversed so far, Lalit, which one holds very, very dear to you?
I think the naval sort of career is something that I deeply cherish. It gives you an opportunity to man up and to human up, get some invaluable leadership lessons. As I was describing, you are working with people and training them to die for the country. It's never an easy job. And more important, the kind of diverse experiences that you have to go through with, very little notice and training. So absolutely, Navy would be my first choice.
Fantastic. Does it need some kind of a mindset shift for you to don these multiple roles? You started off your career, like you said, with the Navy, moved into different segment of the industry, right? With Datamatics to LG Electronics to News Corp. Does it need a shift in mindset when you take on these roles in different industries and sectors?
Yeah, I guess a few things. I think the first one has to do with the comfort of getting out of comfort zone, because you are getting into an uncertain zone, and that is never easy. You're getting into something completely different. I mean, there are no adjacencies. It is very rewarding and very exhilarating at the same time, simply because you get to do things that don't come with the normal progression that all of us are used to. The second part is the ability to deal with the uncertainty, right? And specifically when it comes to our lives and careers, the thing that we always take solace in is the certainty, the predictability of, where we are going, right? And when you traverse this path, you got to be comfortable with the uncertainty that comes with it. And the third has to do with being comfortable with ambiguity or navigating ambiguity, because once again, you get into a very different, unknown territory, and that obviously brings in a lot of ambiguity, right? So I would say uncertainty, ambiguity, and of course, the comfort in getting out of comfort zone from time to time.
I think that's a perfect segue into the next section of our conversation, which is the world of business post pandemic. Everything that you stated, uncertainty, getting out of the comfort zone, ambiguity, is so very true in the world that we are in today. So, given that, what do you see as the new world that is going to look like, or that's going to shape up as we sit and look into the new year?
Yeah, so I think the word on the other side of this pandemic is going to be very, very different. We're seeing some early signs of what some of those differences are going to be, but I would look at the triangulation of the workforce, and the location dimension, right? Essentially, it means what kind of work, who does it, and where it gets executed. And there are profound paradigm shifts, that are coming in all the three dimensions, right? Work would chase people. People would go and live in places that are safe, secure, and habitable. And of course, the work itself is going to undergo profound shifts, because the word on the other side, the new normal, the next normal, brings very different kinds of opportunities for companies, for businesses to stay relevant. They will need to mitigate the challenges that go with these three dimensions, right? And of course, there is no one size fit all kind of an approach. Every industry segment will take its own sort of path, but every company, every industry will have to think about these three dimensions.
And if you were to have a crystal ball, more than a crystal ball, I would say, since you are very closely working with a lot of the GCCs, what insights are you drawing from what is happening today? And what do you see as the skills in demand would look like in the new horizon?
So I look at three directional changes, and that obviously will lead to the skill sets that will be in high demand. The first one is, the fact that digital is the new business as usual, right? Every company, every business will get Amazonized. Every company will be a technology business in disguise of a bank, in disguise of a retailer, in disguise of an airline, or disguise of a healthcare company. So therefore, technology will now embed every process, every function, every product, every service, transforming businesses into digitally determined organizations. The second trend has to do with data. And data, of course, will lead to paradigms like, AI. And data is going to be the new oil, as it is so aptly said. The success and the failures of businesses is now going to be dependent upon how effectively they leverage data, not only to analyze what is going right, where they could bring about improvements, but also to predict the future, right? To build their own perspective of crystal ball. And the future of businesses is going to be driven by, the ability of organizations to transform into data-driven decision-making enterprises. The third has to do with the agility and the resiliency that companies will have to build for quick adoption of the emerging paradigms. This could mean anything. This could mean blockchain. This could mean automation. This could mean cloud. This could mean the much broader context of, what digital is all about to the businesses. But I guess there is not much time businesses will have in the future in order to uh, discover, identify, select what are some of the trends that will reimagine, reshape their industries, and what they need to do to quickly, adopt these trends to stay relevant, to stay competitive as businesses. In terms of the future skill sets, so I guess two trends. One, what are these specific skill sets? And as I said, everything that has to do with digital and data, right? They are going to be in huge demand. And digital is a much broader concept, from cloud to automation, from AI to mobile. Everything, has a digital dimension to it. So digital is going to be something which is going to be in great demand. The second skill will have to do with data, right? Business analysts to data analysts to skills that will help data to be presented in a manner where you can draw upon actionable insights. The second part of the skill sets is going to be the fact that everyone's going to be hiring almost for the first time, since we know everybody's going to be hiring similar kinds of skills. So whether it's a technology platform or a product company, whether it's a traditional corporation, or whether it is a services company, the skill sets that are going to be hired are going to be very identical. And this will, of course, lead to a widening gap between, demand and supply from the perspective of, certain kinds of skill sets. I guess what COVID and the pandemic has done, it has brought about a sense of urgency for organizations to be digitally determined. And the concept of digitally or digital determination is, notches or layers above digital transformation, right? So as a digitally determined organization, every facet of a company or an enterprise has a digital dimension to it.
So that's an interesting phrase that I heard, digital determination. And more so, I think you called out really well on the directional changes companies will go through, the Amazonization of organization, if that's the term that is taking shape. If this is what is going to be the new reality, what should business leaders should be paying attention to? What should be they be doing differently?
So one way to look at it is having those three eyes, right? One eye focused on, what happened, what went right, and what could have been done better. The second focused on what is happening today, and therefore ensuring that, the right lessons for the future are sort of derived. And the third eye focused more into the crystal ball, right? In terms of looking at, where, what are some of the trends and paradigm shifts that are, reshaping their industries, and what can they do from the perspective of organizational DNA, from the perspective of workforce transformation, from the perspective of retooling, reskilling, the organization to ensure that they are able to execute on some of the emerging trends, right? I mean, the one commodity that is going to be in short supply is going to be the time that companies would have in future to stay the course. Not very long ago, you could undertake a strategic project and give it 5 years before, it sort of became a reality. And today, we live in a world where there are digital companies that publish a new version literally every week or sometimes even every day, right? So I guess speed, agility, flexibility, resiliency are going to be, some of the traits that the business leaders will have to adopt. They'll have to think technology, they'll have to think digital, they'll have to think about the connected world where it's all about building relationships with whosoever is their customer. And to do that, they'll have to open out channels, whether these are digital channels or conventional offline channels, to understand, their customers and to stay ahead of the curve in terms of serving their aspirations and demands.
And since you have done quite a lot of work, particularly in the GCC space, Lalit, if I'm a prospective organization wanting to offshore stuff, what's going on in my mind? And if I am the recipient of that work coming here, what are the things that one need to be looking into to ensure that that particular piece of work comes in and we do a fantastic job around it?
So I think this is a very interesting question because, there is a more profound segmentation that is taking place on both the sending side and the receiving side in terms of how you look at the two sides of the coin or two sides of the fence, as they say. When you look at the sending side, organizations that are sending the work to, global locations, they are very clearly looking at the implications on workforce transformation and looking at the implications of work that is core strategic and will drive the competitive differentiation of the company versus work that is to build capacity, is to execute on short-term projects, work that is transactional, commoditized. And this is where you would funnel or pipe the work into two different channels, right? So to contextualize how the word of GCCs is changing with some of the paradigm shifts that we spoke about earlier, for most companies cutting across industry, size, location lines, technology, digital data is now the new core. It is fundamental, it is foundational, it is strategic, and this will drive the future of many of these companies. This is leading to a few kinds of challenges. The most important challenge has to do with the ability of an organization to drive change management that goes with workforce transformation. And the workforce transformation dimension, in very simple terms, that we are talking about is induction of new skill sets, new job families, new ways of working. And the profoundness of this change or transformation is something that organizations cannot manage from a change management perspective. So GCCs are becoming very effective levers to drive organizational change management because effectively you are giving away change to a remote location, to your own workforce that does not have any legacy or any mindset around how work was done, before, right? So one important dimension, therefore, to sort of recap this point is the role that GCCs play in terms of being change agents and in driving the enterprise business transformation. The second has to do with something that I spoke about earlier. Everyone's hiring same kinds of skills. A bank is hiring cloud engineers, Microsoft is hiring cloud engineers, and so is Accenture, IBM, TCS, right? The service providers. And this is leading to a widening gap between demand and supply. And it becomes more difficult for traditional companies to hire the new skill sets because they are not known as sort of career repositories in this new skill sets, right? So therefore, a GCC gives them an opportunity to build a different kind of a DNA, right? How do you build an Amazonized version of the company so you can now hire technology people and build the right product culture or a digital culture into the organization. The third dimension has to do with, just the scale, which has both qualitative and quantitative dimensions. The scale at which things have to be done. More people, better people. And once again, this is something that becomes very hard to execute in home locations, and GCCs become great opportunities for companies to drive that quantitative and qualitative scale, right? So the two part from a sending location perspective is the work that is not differentiating or will not help an organization drive its change management goes to the services companies, and the work that is to be led by employees, planning, strategy, architecture, building core products, leading the charge on digital determination, all that is coming to GCCs, right? So the differentiation between the GCCs and the service providers now is purely along the workforce and the work dimension. What kind of work, core versus non-core, and similarly, workforce dimension, employee versus anybody else, right? So that's the sending side. On the receiving side, given this change, when it comes to the GCCs, obviously they're becoming, more impactful part of the organization. They have the charge on driving digital transformation, building new business capabilities, and also building a pool of enterprise talent, which essentially means that some of the GCC talent would become future global leaders for these companies. So therefore, if you're on the receiving side, you are now looking at the new responsibilities that you've been delegated or empowered with, and how would you raise the bar in order to fulfill those responsibilities. On the service provider side, now it's got to do a lot with the interplay with the organization, with the local GCCs, and to play a very constructive role, not only in providing capacity and value like cost arbitrage to companies, but also playing an important role in the digital transformation or accelerating the digital determination of these companies.
So what I hear you saying is, to some extent, lot of the strategies will also be driven by the GCCs as a way forward.
Yeah, and I'll describe this in an interesting way. There's this growing prophecy around diminishing distance between a GCC and the enterprise. The next turn of GCC, and it's already here for many companies, the GCC is the enterprise. It's no longer that outpost. It's no longer, that remote office. It is the mainstream organization. It means several things. It means they're global leaders. It means these leaders have functional business responsibilities for the enterprise. And it also means they are now responsible for driving business outcomes, right? So that's a whole different way of thinking. The day is not far when you have the C-suite residing out of GCCs, right? In the talent leadership war that is going around the world, very clearly, locations like India, where the quality of talent that we are producing, developing, will play an important role in such empowered jobs moving to India, right? So that's one way of looking at it in terms of GCCs becoming the enterprise. In fact, many companies are now shedding the GCC prefix or suffix, and they're just calling themselves by the name of the company. You are XYZ Bangalore, XYZ India. You're not the GCC of a company. You are the company. In fact, another way to look at it is, for many companies which are more traditional businesses, the GCCs are top of the stack organization because they're doing work that the company cannot do in their home location, either because of a DNA issue or because of their inability to find talent at scale or manage the complexity of the change management that goes with transforming into a technology enterprise.
I think that's going to be a very interesting pivot as and when it is happening. With that, in mind, what do you kind of foretell as the service industries in India would look like in the next couple of years?
So I think the service industry obviously will have to keep upskilling, retooling, and reshifting their focus. Given the fact that those monolith long-term systems are gone, it is now a value game. It is about the ability to build systems, products for their customers in very short period of time. It has to move in a non-linear direction. I mean, traditionally, growth was related to the headcount. So there has to be a different way of thinking about value. It'll have to collaborate and partner with their customers at a global level, right? Not just in the home office, but also with the GCCs, because GCCs are now custodians, repositories, and owners of several organizational functions. The center of gravity for many of these functions has moved to GCCs. So, the GCC is the new enterprise, and the service industry is still coming to terms in terms of embracing this new reality of a distributed organization and how to engage effectively with a distributed organization, which obviously brings in a lot of complexity. And other than that, of course, just the workforce transformation needs to be accelerated, because the kind of work that will even come to services companies is going to be a lot more sophisticated and complex, right? So therefore, smaller, nimbler, but more intense, more complex projects, ability to execute on more complex projects will be the new normal.
There you go. We have been talking to Lalit Ahuja, founder and CEO of ANSR.com. We discussed about the business world post-pandemic, the shifting, changing roles of global capability centers. Before we continue any further, we slip into a round here called as the Power of Three round. Are we ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Perfect. Three companies that you would like to set up their base in India.
Tesla, Apple, and maybe CVS Health.
Super. Nice choice. Three individuals you would love to have on the ANSR board.
That's a tricky question, right? Because there are obviously, a lot of people. But if I had a choice, definitely someone like a Warren Buffett. Steve Jobs is not here. He was somebody, legendary, iconic, but, somebody that I've sort of idolized from day one. I have had the, fortune of working with, Rupert Murdoch for a very long period of time, right? And of course, in as much as he's a, very controversial leader, but a lot of my upbringing, learning in terms of getting things done came from Rupert Murdoch. So absolutely, why not?
Fantastic. Three companies to have and three individuals to be on the board, Lalit. Three routines that has helped Lalit's professional success.
So I think I'm very disciplined, right? I mean, for me, 7:30, 7:29, and that discipline has helped. The second just has to do with rigor. I mean, don't take anything lightly. Whatever you do has to be done with full force. And the third is this whole notion of completeness. I tell everyone there's not a day in my life when I've had one unread, unresponded email in my inbox, right? So something that I've practiced. My sleep time depends upon when the work is done and over with, right? And you can sleep really well because you know what's in store for you the next day.
Wonderful. Three things on Lalit's bucket list for 2022.
So I think the first thing is I want to travel a lot. I think one thing that COVID taught us, we took travel and everything that went with it for granted. I've been to 101 countries, many of them during my Navy days when you had a lot of restrictions in terms of how you could experience some of these countries. And many of them, of course, on business. And there's only so much of the world you've seen, even after being to 101 countries. So I definitely, I think COVID has been a very humbling experience for all of us, right? And there are some wonderful things that life provisions for us. One of them is, of course, seeing different locations, cultures, places, and I want to focus on that. I've not had a lot of time to read over the last 5 years. I think being an entrepreneur in particular is tough. Every sort of minute is taken away. So I want to make sure that I make some time to, step up on reading. And the third is giving back. I think there are a lot of experiences that I want to share, either using the academic channel. I've done this in the past. Want to sort of restart writing articles, maybe starting the book that I always wanted to do, all sort of bundled in the third one.
Maybe inspire someone today is just the right antidote for you to get started.
Absolutely. And thanks for this opportunity.
And the last of the part of 3 round, Lalit, 3 lessons learned in your illustrious life journey.
So I guess, I would take back, and I described this in the earlier part of this conversation, to my Navy days. First lesson had to do with results, right? I mean, whatever it takes. In Navy, there used to be a phrase that was used in a very positive connotation: beg, borrow, or steal. You got to get the work done. There are no excuses. I mean, how can you give an excuse when you're in a frontline force like the Navy? So, driving results is something that has been a guiding mantra for me. Obviously, people, who you are and what you can be, is all dependent upon, your team. You're as good as your team. All right. So I guess that was other big lesson. Maybe, again, something I learned in terms of how the true tenets of human resource management are practiced in the forces. Not only and everything about everyone, because that's the level of detail. You got to know people, right? But you got to guide and motivate and encourage them to do what is required, and also help them in terms of giving their best, right? So I would say, managing team was the second part. The third, which has come, I learned from the Navy and applied it effectively in the other journeys that I've been through, is how do you run and learn at the same time? And I got this phrase from my BITS Pilani days. When I went to BITS Pilani, it was a very expensive institution, and majority of the students had to go through a program called Earn While You Learn, right? Because you couldn't otherwise pay for your tuition fees and other expenses. So when I got to Navy, it became learn while you run, right? So there's nothing like you learn and practice and then walk and crawl and run. So I guess, how do you run and learn, right? Something that has been a big lesson for me. Done very different jobs. There's never been an opportunity to learn. You start running the first day itself, and as you're running, you have your team run with you.
Wonderful insights there. Thank you, Lalit, for being a sport and participating in the Power of 3 round. Furthering on, we did discuss about the business post-pandemic, right? And there are a couple of themes that is kind of coming out. And what is one good, fantastic thing to see is the growth and transformation that every organization is looking into. And with that is also coming into effect, like you said, the talent war, the Great Resignation is happening, the talent wars are happening. What does this mean to the CEO and to the HR head? What do they need to be doing differently in order to succeed in this landscape?
Yeah, I think this is again, I'll use a very simple word to describe what's going on, which is, I think everybody is very humbled by this whole experience of great resignation. I guess the biggest lesson for the leaders, for CEOs and HR, is to prepare themselves for messaging a holistic proposition to the employees, right? You got to check all the boxes at the same time. You got to take care of compensation and benefits, which is obviously hygiene. You got to demonstrate your ability to practice a consistent company culture and provide, a good brand experience to employees. You have to talk about the work people will do and how it will impact the business and what does growth look like, right? So therefore, we've sort of now moved away from a word where you post a job and talk about some of the transactional statistics around location and compensation to a more compelling employee value proposition, right? So I guess companies are beginning to realize that if they have to find the right people and keep them, it's going to be now about speaking to them in a language that will help you in find the lookalikes, right? I mean, people will join the right organization once they understand how the similarities between their aspirations and their style of functioning is similar to what an organization is all about, right? So I think everyone's pondering, because if you keep giving salary increases, there's always somebody who will offer more in that sense, right? So therefore, people are going to join, more holistic propositions than just another job and just another way of earning money.
It absolutely boils down to the differentiators rather than the commonalities.
Absolutely. And you got to now create those differentiators, right? And those differentiators, many of them are going to be intangible. I guess another interesting facet is that now people are on treadmill, right? Because you got to talk, you got to walk your talk, and you got to walk your walk, right? Think about it from this perspective. You can't get away, but with just a message, you got to execute on that message. You got to show it what you said, and you got to show it, in a treadmill kind of a manner. And of course, you got to keep getting better at what you do, right? And I think that's one good thing that's coming out of the Great Resignation. Eventually, it'll all settle in when you start making those connections, right? Connections between the right jobs, the right companies, and the right people, because then people will start making those choices. I mean, take the commodity and the transaction away from this matchmaking and make it, a lot more relationship oriented.
I think that's a great message out there. Make it relationship oriented. Look out for your employee value propositions. Don't offer that everybody else is offering, but find out what are your differentiators that resonates with the potential employees.
Absolutely. Right. And I think, the onus is as much on the employer as on the employee to do the right thing. Right. So I think it gets a lot more even and leveled right now with what's going on.
And will all of this complicate further when you talk about a hybrid work environment, when you talk about collaborative spaces?
So I think we're getting into an interesting side of post-pandemic era. The verdict is not out as yet, but what we know for sure are a few things. The office is here to stay. The office has changed forever. It will now be a more immersive and experiential environment that will allow employees to collaborate, to celebrate, to go for cultural assimilation, to connect. So therefore, it will become a lot more purpose driven, right? So you have to bring a sense of purpose to the workspace, and flexibility is going to be at the core of whatever you do. Companies will intentionally segment their workforce. Possible configuration is jobs that are to be done in office and jobs that can be done remotely. And then you have the space in between. So the ability of the organization to make that differentiation and not have a homogeneous or a same approach for all kinds of jobs is possibly going to go away, right? I mean, if you're the HR director, it's a high touch job and therefore it requires you to be in the office. But if you're a full stack developer, you come to office to meet your manager, to celebrate a win, to collaborate with one of your team members. to solve a complex problem, and so on, or to attend a town hall, right? So I think there are lots of permutations and combinations at play right now. We're not very far from how it is going to play out, but there would be some interesting manifestations on the other side, and it'll not be one size fit all for people doing different kinds of jobs and for companies in different kinds of industry, right? So the biggest change is, of course, the transformation of workforce from centralized to a distributed manifestation.
So the name of the game here is agility, resilience, and going with the flow.
Completely agree.
Great, Lalit. I think these are some wonderful nuggets, wisdom that you shared with us. This show is all about creating ripples of inspiration. For all the listeners out here, if there is an Inspire Someone Today message from Lalit, what's that Inspire Someone Today message?
I think we are at a point of inflection, right? We are at the end of the beginning of a very interesting phase in every aspect, right? Whether it's the enrichment of our careers in terms of impact that we can create on our consumers, on businesses, on the companies, on the culture. The time is now, right? I think this experience that we've gone through for the past 2 years has been a big wake up and a big shake up, right? It has restacked and created an opportunity for all of us to play this game very, very differently. So I guess one message I want to leave for everyone is to take full advantage of the tremendous opportunities that lie ahead, right? We've seen, notwithstanding the impairing impact of the pandemic, we've seen how businesses cutting across industry lines have grown and continue to grow, right? I mean, the economy and the markets have never been as strong as they are today. And this is only the beginning. The new world that we are getting into is going to be a lot more of, what we've been seeing. So I think it's time to roll up our sleeves and get our feet dirty and to, take full advantage of the opportunities that lie ahead.
Lalit, thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom. More than that, taking your time and talking to us today. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Srikanth. It's been wonderful talking to you, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone Today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what to listen, feel free to share them and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Srikanth, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.